All right, what's up, man? Nate Liss with BreakoutFinder.com. I am here with Ryan Lopes, also a part of BreakoutFinder.com. You can find him at StillRyan5 on Twitter. I'm sure you're already following him. This is the first sort of duo recording video that I've tried to put together. I'm glad Ryan could get on here, and we are going to go over Ryan's top 10 wide receivers of the 2019 NFL draft class. And different from what maybe you heard on the Sonic Truth Dynasty podcast, this is from sort of an NFL draft context. We're going to touch on Dynasty, but when you hear the draft order and stuff like that, just keep in mind that this is based on evaluation of the NFL draft and kind of fits for teams and whatnot. So what's up, Ryan?
Doing great, man. I appreciate you, rolling this out, kind of doing all the hard work behind the scenes, and just letting me come on and rolling out the carpet and let me get some takes off. That's what it's all about this time of year. Is standing on top of a hill and planting your flag.
Oh man, I know. I'm looking forward to it. So I've seen your list, and I understand it, and I like it, and I'm excited to dive into some of these right now. We should. Everybody should know. Like 10 minutes ago, the news about Odell Beckham broke, so everybody's
still
in a hot
sweating.
Sweat.
Still sweating.
Honestly, feels uncomfortable. It's amazing for the Browns. I'm so excited.
I'm very excited for the Browns.
Yes. The Giants are just tanking big time.
Free Saquon. Someone save Saquon.
Nobody can save Saquon. So let's get on to this, man. Let's get right after it. So looking at your list right here, right off the top, number 1, N'Keal Harry. Tell me what you got, Harry.
Yeah, I really think when you and Maddie the Podfather, crossed that bridge and covered it post combine, I think Matt summed it up perfectly. Harry at the combine, it was a deep sigh of relief. You know what I mean? He just had to go in there and do enough. A few days before the combine, a week before the combine, he had that 42-inch vertical video posted out there, and fans like you and I who, were kind of fighting off the, I don't know how athletic, Harry is, and all these takes that were brewing and leading up to this point. When that video hit, I thought for sure he was gonna easily, surpass any kind of expectations at the combine. So for me, very excited to see how he ended up performing and did enough for me to kind of keep that stock where it is. And I had him as the wide receiver 1 kind of entering Indianapolis, have him as the wide receiver 1, of course, exiting in Indianapolis, 4.5 340. So again, did enough, checked the boxes, didn't hit that 42-inch vertical, but 38.5 will certainly do. And he's just the kind of receiver, man. He just feels safe. I'm not sure that he's probably not he's not a Julio superstar. He's not an AJ Green superstar, but he's a really good player. I've used the Alshon Jeffrey comp a couple times, and that's kind of who I see. Just someone that wins downfield, wins with the ball in the air, and again is athletic enough to make things work in the open field and kind of work after the catch. So good football player.
And the requisite production, man. I mean, a big time thing a lot of times is that these guys that produce highly as a freshman end up having good NFL careers. I mean, that's always a kind of a catalyst in here is, how early did you perform? We look at breakout age. We look at stuff like that. Always been a factor. He's got a 95th percentile breakout age, 18.7 years old. So this is a guy that did it early, kind of grew into everything, went to the combine, performed stellar, and kind of became a unanimous number 1 for most people, which is interesting because DK Metcalf goes out there and performs one of the most unreal combine performances athletically that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And still, N'Keal Harry ends up pretty much tops of most people's list. And from a dynasty standpoint, and I know we talked about this on the podcast, I feel like he could have an equal ceiling potentially, and his floor is much higher than most everybody in this class. But yeah, man, N'Keal Harry, definitely top guy. And all right, so who you got at number 2 then? I'm excited to hear this.
So 2 is probably where maybe I start to split and kind of maybe lean to the other side of the fork in the road. I think at this point DK Metcalf is the consensus number 2. He might be the number 1 for many people after what he did at the combine. But for me, I kind of flip-flopped him coming in. I had Metcalf at 2, and I had this guy at number 3. But after the combine, Hakeem Butler for me, man, just kind of we we knew he was a freak before, but what he did at the combine for his size, for his kind of build, just kind of sewed that up for me. I feel a lot more comfortable. I shouldn't say a lot more comfortable. I feel confident that his game translates. I'm not sure that he's he's not Mike Evans, but that's kind of who I see as far as build and stuff like that. And his ability, of course, to win with the ball in the air. But I feel like he's a lot more refined than a Metcalf is right now. And I think, the agility scores and stuff like that leave a little bit to be desired with Metcalf, and we'll talk about him in a moment here. But I think Butler, I just came away feeling a little more comfortable. It's probably splitting hairs, but I'm gonna ride for my guy, Hakeem Butler, wide receiver too.
He's got so you're definitely, I think compared to what I've heard from a lot of people, I think you do kind of stand a little bit alone in this. Not that he doesn't deserve to be here, but I just think that people oftentimes kind of really lean on that production. So you go back and look at him as a sophomore, go back and look at it as a freshman, didn't do a lot, but the physical tools. And when you talk in scouting terms, a lot of times you're not necessarily eyeballing the production. This is where the whole Riley Ridley corollary comes in. But you think, okay, he's got X, he's got Y attributes. How can I coach him into these things, make him better at these things? Where is he special? Where is he rare? And the guy's incredibly athletic at 6'6", 220 plus pounds. So he's got freaky size and an incredible catch radius too. So, hopefully he goes to a team that can really utilize him. The one thing that really stands out is his college dominator, 88th percentile, 43.5%. So really stellar there. And then, man, talk about the yards per reception, 22 yards per reception. So, I mean,
downfield.
Downfield threat with that size. So it's incredible. I'm excited to see where he goes. What round are you predicting Hakeem Butler goes in?
I think, the real bullets start flying in April, and we're talking real NFL draft here. I think he sneaks into the top 32. I really do. I think a team falls in love with his size. We don't really see these kind of big wide receivers as often anymore. A lot of people are, we just saw guys like Cole Beasley, Smokey Brown. All these guys are getting paid, obviously, in free agency this week, and we saw obviously Julian Edelman. All these smaller type wide receivers are really thriving, and the big wide receivers kind of gone by the wayside. They're kind of forgotten about. And I think Hakeem Butler is going to be the guy that kind of brings that trend back. I want to go back to the production. I know a lot of people are talking about how he didn't break out, and obviously referencing Alan Lazard as his teammate, and how he hasn't really made it to the league. So how did he not end up beating out these types of players? I think people like that, again, you have to look at the whole picture. Production is important, breakout age and stuff like that. But I think the way Butler plays, his size, his build, to me, I kind of find myself leaning towards that more. Although, again, I certainly do see the argument the other way, where people are kind of pumping the brakes a little bit as well.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I know that on our breakoutfinder.com website, when you look at guys like Hakeem Butler, his teammates score obviously not as high as other players in this draft class, not as high as, say, an A.J. Brown, Paris Campbell, these guys that are playing with lots of guys that got drafted to the league highly. But then again, Alan Lazard, I mean, we were talking about a guy that still had requisite skills, that was good enough to he was an undrafted free agent, but he's sticking around rosters. He's still around the league. So, it's a good ball player. And when you're in college, you're still talking about some of the best guys, in the world that are playing at that level. So it does count. All right. So talking about big wide receivers, tell me about your number 3 wide receiver.
Yeah, kind of hinted at it before. Of course, DK Metcalf. I don't think you're going to see too many rankings with him, outside of the top 2 or 3, let alone the top 5. Again, what he did at the combine was otherworldly. I mean, we instantly saw the Calvin Johnson, the Julio Jones type comparisons, and then after that dust kind of settled and people kind of stopped tweeting and stuff like that and backed away. Then the whole second wave came in. Everyone's talking about this guy's agility scores. There was obviously all the tweets about how Tom Brady was a better a more agile athlete. How Hakeem Butler, how Metcalf's going to be good in the league if he just doesn't have to turn or change directions. So again, everyone's going to find holes in every player's games. It's just what we do at this time of year. But I mean, you can obviously easily argue that Metcalf has the highest ceiling of any wide receiver in this class, just given the way that he filled out his little mock draftable bubble there. So just a super impressive athlete. Kind of does it all. Again, to me, not as maybe technically refined off the line compared to someone like Butler, who again kind of flashes a little bit more, especially for his size. But I think there's a lot to like about Metcalf's game, and we saw the Josh Gordon comparisons, before the combine, and I think that's pretty much where his ceiling lies. If you kind of put him side by side, looking at again those mock draftable webs, someone like Martavis Bryant also kind of comes to mind as far as ceiling or something like that. So super interesting prospect, super polarizing prospect, and one that I'm sure is going to keep getting debated again. I think he does end up also in the first round, and people were saying John Green won't be able to help himself as early as 4 overall. So who knows, man? I feel like his floor might be a top 10 or top 15 even at this point. Just the way that the buzz is kind of been building up. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've kind of been saying this because I just feel this way. Like, when you see a guy test this athletically, I mean, he ran a 4.33 at 230 pounds.
Stupid.
The dude was tied for the top 2, basically. You had 2 guys run a 4.31. You had 2 guys run a 4.33. So essentially he's tied in the top 2 or the top 4 overall at 20 pounds heavier than anybody else who ran in that group. So there's no way that a team isn't just going to fall in love with the measurables here, and I assume he definitely is inside the top 10, and I've been saying I'm freaked out that he goes to the Buffalo Bills. Like, that's the scariest thought in the world to me. But yeah, I think there's a lot to like about DK Metcalf, and the breakout age, 72nd percentile, so 19.7 years old. That's impressive in its own right. He just didn't have the production, and this is kind of a weird one where you sort of have to suspend disbelief. We look at what he does well. The agility stuff really didn't come up until he tested at the combine. And there's even reason to believe that he slipped a little bit, that he would have been a little bit faster than what we saw. I think he ran a 7.563 cone.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe he was more likely a 7.2, a 7.3. I don't know, which would have, I think, curbed people's opinions a little bit more. Because he might
have officially been a 7.38, I think is what I'm looking at right here. So
okay, yeah. So
for what it's worth.
Yeah, I can see it. So I mean, and maybe he would have been a touch faster. So that would have certainly helped the cause in quieting the people that are bringing up the agility scenarios right now. But it is what it is. It's this time of the year. People are trying to poke holes in everything.
Yeah. And I will say it's interesting that that never, that agility argument was never there when people were, salivating over this kid's tape. Obviously missed some time with the neck injury, so a lot of people were wondering, what if, and obviously he wasn't on the field as much. Production wasn't there as a result, but I heard little to no commentary about his agility or how that looked, on the quote unquote tape, prior to the combine. So it's just interesting how these numbers get published, and of course they're not great, but how those numbers can instantly affect our thinking. We could have had these opinions cemented in, but then all of a sudden we're going back and we're almost completely reevaluating and breaking down a player all over again. So it's all part of the process, I guess.
For sure. I mean, this is how it goes every year. So all right, well, here's the question. This is the guy that absolutely tore up the combine. I think for a majority of people, he was not up in their rankings. I mean, I looked at tons of lists where he did not exist prior to him testing at the combine. So tell me about your number 4 receiver here.
I'm going to speak on him very, very briefly because I really want to give you the floor. You've flown this flag very, very high, very, very proud, and for that, that's all you, man. That's hats off and all that. I didn't, I was one of those that he was on my radar just given the school, but Paris Campbell was someone that kind of flirted with that 10-15 range, and then the more guys that started to talk him up, and kind of hinted at this combine performance. You, of course, being one of them, it was someone that I instantly went back, and I was also kind of watching him again after his teammate Terry McLaurin was standing out at the Senior Bowl. So I kind of ran them both back in parallel, but Paris Campbell was someone that I just kept coming back to kind of in the weeks leading up to the combine, and so I can definitely say I was a little bit late on that train, but I tried to make it right by going to the combine, at least talking about him in that top 10 range. But we're just looking at a phenomenal athlete. I think I'm going to pull up Mr. Zach Whitman's 3 Sigma athlete here right now. He was the number 2 athlete in the class. He's a 2.8 Sigma, Spark athlete. So again, just a super impressive player. He kind of reminds me a little bit of former Ohio State player Curtis Samuel a little bit in the open field. That's someone that I was personally very high on as well. So I'm a little frustrated that I didn't put that picture together beforehand and all that. But again, man, I would love to hear kind of your thoughts and kind of wrap it all up and put a nice little bow on it for everybody.
Man, Paris Campbell was one of those guys, and watching him on the tape, I think he gets sort of an unfair rap. I know a lot of people want to say he's a short route guy or he's a deep ball guy. I think that there's more to Paris Campbell's ability than that, and I guarantee that his draft position is going to validate it. I thought he was going to be a first-round pick before the combine. Obviously, after the combine, what he did is you can't put that back in the bottle. Like, we've seen it now. The guy is, an off-the-charts athlete. I wish we would have got some 3-cone from him, but I assume it would have still been really good. Where he really popped, though, in the breakout finder was the teammate score, and this is something that we've used to help identify sort of a lack of production outside of maybe one big year. So like with a Kevin White or somebody like that who didn't have a big teammate score because of the players he played with, Paris Campbell really did, because of the guys that are sort of in that background, the Curtis Samuels, the Noah Browns, all these guys that he played with, they all played a factor in opportunity. And when he came out here in his senior year, 90 catches, 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns. He's got rushing production. He's got the receiving production. He's got the kick return production. And all that stuff is attributed in what we call the dynamic score. And in this class, he had one of the highest dynamic scores of the whole group. I think he was number 4 overall. So that kind of alludes to like an elusiveness, an ability with the ball in his hands. And it's evident when you watch him, on film. But for me, what really stuck out was just sort of his after the catch ability, his ability to sort of make guys miss and be a big time threat. So I think different than Curtis Samuel, he's not going to be as much of the sort of rushing dual threat as he was, but he's definitely going to be the type of guy that you can get the ball in his hands and expect big plays from him. And in this game where more and more we're sort of looking for that quick play, get the ball out fast, get it in the hands of the playmaker, I think Paris Campbell with his speed is going to be coveted because he can take the top off a defense. You can get him on a crosser, something short, and he's going to open things up. So I'm a big time fan of what he brought to the table. So let's go on, man. Let's go to a number 5 here. Tell me about your number 5 receiver. Yeah,
another player that I think you've been really high on throughout the entire process at this point. AJ Brown, again, I think we'll probably talk about teammate score a little bit here too, but just box scores in general, super productive in that Mississippi offense. He's in my top 5. I don't feel great about it. I don't feel bad about it. This class is really good, so I think that's where he deserves to be. I think his tape is good enough. At the combine, didn't necessarily wow. I think what was he over here? He was a 4.49 in the 36-inch vert. Again, numbers that aren't bad, but they're not. I mean, in a class filled with freak athletes, I think at that point we're going to probably be disappointed by that, whether that's fair or not. But again, he has a lot going for him. I know there was questions about his ability in the slot versus on the outside. Can he play on the outside? I'm interested to kind of get your take as far as where you would go comparison wise. I've heard a lot of them from Quincy Enunwa to this year's Juju Smith-Schuster. I'd be curious to kind of see what direction you would go in and kind of how you think he translates to the next level.
Yeah, AJ Brown, man, he's a different breed here. I know he's going to get that sort of slot vibe, and people are going to peg him as that. He's definitely a good receiver in the sense that he can be a volume guy. And again, I go back to how the evolution of the game is, and it's sort of a team-by-team thing. You got to, I guess, assume where does he go, and are they going to use him right? I've heard the Quincy Enunwa thing. A.J. Brown's a lot bigger than I think people would have expected. It's 6 foot, 226, so he's
built for sure.
Size. Yeah,
dude. I mean, we saw the pictures of him right next to Metcalf, and he was obviously a little bit shorter, but he was just as cut, just as built.
Right, and you hear like the other comps will be like Dwayne Bowe, guys like that. What I like about A.J. Brown is the production against tough competition and just being gritty, making tough catches. He looks natural as a receiver. He had the collegiate production, which different. Maybe you and I differ a little bit on this, where you were a lot more, I would say, tape aligned.
Yep,
maybe,
for sure.
And I can be a lot more of the production. I like to try to play both sides of the fence, but for me,
I think the best evaluation is you have to, and that's kind of what the breakout finder really helps do. I mean, you want to find a way to bridge those gaps and really combine both those worlds, so that either you're contextualizing the numbers, it just helps paint the bigger picture. I don't think it's fair to any of these players to really use one or weigh one more heavily than the other in the end.
For sure. And I think that's something that we're going to see an evolution with people, that they're going to evolve to the understanding that, look, we've got to learn to evaluate these players in both ways. It's kind of again, I go back to this Riley Ridley corollary, because Riley Ridley had a lot of people on the bandwagon. He didn't have the production. Then he went to the combine and just crapped the bed. So it's like, what do you do at this point? And I get that people love his tape, but it's like he didn't have the production. He doesn't have the athleticism. So what do you do now? Are you going to stick to your takes, or are you going to make adjustments? And I know there's people out there that believe that you shouldn't adjust. Like, you always had your analysis. You got to believe in your process. Don't move. But what I do is I go, okay, he runs a 4.6 or a 4.65 or whatever he ran, or 4.58. I can't even remember. But then I start to go, okay, he runs a 4.58. He's an outside receiver. Who's he outrunning? Is he going to be able to beat corners that are a 4.42? Can he beat a corner that's a 4.38? So I kind of start to do the math now on how these things are going to fit together. With A.J. Brown at a 4.49, that's 69th percentile, that size. I think it's good enough. I think he's quick enough, and it's good enough to work for him. In the breakout finder, and again, this is to put context to what a player did in college. These aren't necessarily rankings. But he was number 1 overall in the whole class because his teammate score was high with DeMarcus Lodge, with N'Keal Harry. He had a good level of competition score because they played tough competition. Market share was high, 32%. So there's a lot to like about A.J. Brown. It's just kind of interesting where people lump him in, personally speaking.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's move on. Let's go to number 6 here. Tell me about your number 6 guy, because I don't think anybody's got him at 6.
No, and this is, I know you just kind of hit on, how takes change, how opinions change, kind of after this process. And I think, to me, that's the best part of the entire process is, when these prospects really do show up at Indianapolis, either ones that weren't on your radar at all, or maybe we're kind of just floating around somewhere in the middle. Guys you didn't really have a strong opinion, or guys you didn't really strongly gravitate towards. Miles Boykin is my wife.
Yeah. Yeah.
and they did enough on tape to warrant a second look or whatever the case may be. And then they show out the way they did with that kind of testing. Those guys are personally hard for me to ignore, and that's that's probably where a little more of my stubbornness comes into play. But man, I'm infatuated with Miles Boykin.
He went from sort of a relative unknown amongst this class, with sort of this being dubbed the best class since 2014 prior to the combine. Then we get the combine, and I don't think that expectation has changed. I think that more names got added to the list than ever before. I think that there was names that were at the top. Some of them shifted a little bit. I think people would be surprised who you have at number 10, and that's kind of one of the guys I'm talking about right now. But there's been sort of this shift because so many good athletes tested at this. And you're right, man, when you go down and just look at what he did, drill for drill, man, a 43.5-inch vert is just silly.
Yeah, dude, he's 6'3", 220 pounds.
Yeah.
6'3", 220, 4.42 40. Dude moves.
Yeah,
moves.
6'7", 7'3" cone. Like, to be quite honest with you at this point, man, and I may be crazy saying this, I have a hard time seeing him getting out of round 3.
Yeah,
like
that's
right.
That's fair.
Like Chris Conley-ish type. Like, I feel like he's going to go somewhere middle of round 3, early round 3 to a team that wants a guy that's got the size that they can believe that they can mold into something. Yeah, it's 6'4", 220 with just the most ridiculous athleticism.
Yeah, he's got wheels.
And I know he's catching some Chris Conley comps. Then we go back and look at the college production. Again, this might be one of the guys with some of the slimmest college production in terms of just overall volume of it. It matters in the sense that it typically will help you identify a player that's going to be a success in the NFL. It doesn't mean that you will not be a success in the NFL. There's enough guys that have come sort of from this depth and ascended and become something, but it means you've got to have caution. But exactly the case here. This is supposed to be an NFL sort of draft analysis understanding of it, and the guy's got all the physical tools. So if they can coach him up, there's no question that he could definitely settle in at this spot and be worth that draft pick. So with that said, let's talk about the next guy on this list, man. This guy might be a little higher than some other people too, but like you said, you're an athleticism snob, so I imagine this is why he's here. Yeah,
I mean, again, this guy, Emmanuel Hall, what do we got? Wide receiver 7. Dude, he falls kind of right in that same group with the Miles Boykins, the Paris Campbells, and the DK Metcalf. Right now on 3 Sigma athlete, he's Zach's wide receiver 3, 2.7 Sig athlete, 6'1", 200 pounds. I think most people, it's all about you don't want to count it twice. If you knew they were athletic coming in, how heavily do you want to weigh that on the way out? So for Emmanuel Sanders, I think there were more questions, about his hands. Obviously, he had a bit of an injury history at school as well. But when he was on the field, given his build, given his speed, just the overall athletic profile, he's in a class again filled with a lot of really talented players, and a bunch of really good deep threats. Emmanuel Hall kind of ended up standing out, kind of put the bow on things at the NFL Combine. Really good athlete. Again, really good downfield threat as well. I think he's just a player that just translates, as cliche as that sounds. I think if coaches aren't as concerned about the drops, he could also be someone that, I'm not saying he's going to sneak into the first round, but he could be, kind of an early mid round, round 2 kind of type selection, just given the way that he profiles and his game again translates.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I think it's so crazy that we got all these dudes that are over 6 foot. This guy's 6'2", over 200, running a 4.39, 43.5-inch vert, 140-inch broad jump. I mean, the explosiveness in these guys in this class is just so unreal. PlayerProfiler.com has best comparable to DJ Chark. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think Chark was a guy that a lot of people kind of again they knew he was athletic, but there were concerns, and again, it's it's kind of how you want to prioritize that. Again, in an ideal world, you are factoring in all that, how athletic he is, the production, obviously the hashtag tape or whatever like that. So you want to blend that all together. So I'm not out here saying that Emmanuel Hall is obviously a perfect prospect. He'd be a lot higher if I had less concerns about him. But I just think the way that he's built, the way that he plays the game, again, over 6 feet with that speed, it's just the league's obviously a passing league, and these kind of guys that can win downfield, they're gonna be coveted. So I think the Sharp comp is fair. And people might hear that name and automatically assume that he's gonna kind of just flutter around in that kind of mediocre territory. But I was high on Emmanuel Hall coming in, and I don't think I've really moved off of him too much, given the concerns. So a safe player for me.
Yeah, I think a team is definitely going to fall in love with him because, again, like over the last handful of years, guys with this kind of speed are typically a lot smaller than this. So we're getting so many of these guys that have this feature size to go with this burner speed that we just have not seen. And it's a hell of a year. I'm going to keep going back to Riley Ridley because I'm personally not a fan, but it's a hell of a year for a guy like Riley Ridley to have jumped into this class because lack athleticism, lack production, and jump into
a lot of good players.
The most athletic class that I think I've ever seen. I mean, right top to bottom, it's got players all over. So speaking of good athletes, let's rotate to your next guy, number 8 wide receiver here. I like this. Tell me about this guy.
Deebo Samuel was a name that a lot of dynasty Devy kind of heads knew about, and I think he made himself. He had a lot of momentum leaving the Senior Bowl, coming into the combine. I think the Senior Bowl he was the class at the wide receiver position. Just kind of was pacing the group, and there were some pretty good names down there. Andy Isabella amongst others, but I think Deebo stood out throughout the entire event, which really does say something. And then he shows up in Indianapolis, as you allude to here, 5'11", 214, 4.4840, 39-inch vertical. These were some numbers, especially the vertical. I guess I'm not surprised by it, but I wasn't expecting that. And so that's, again, it's a good thing. It's surprising. I'm excited about Samuel, man. I'm excited about the way that he wins, downfield, in the end zone, in the open field, crossing routes. He's not afraid to be that bully, as his name would kind of suggest. So there's a lot to like about Samuel, and I think he gets kind of pushed down the list a little bit, just given how talented the class is above him. Yep. But again, just a really good, well-rounded player.
Yep, and in the Breakout Finder, he ranks number 9 overall. A really high teammate score, really high dynamic score, because this is a guy that had rushing production in college, which is always good to see. Had a bunch of kick return production, which is good to see. He's elusive. We know he's elusive. It's another one of these guys, put the ball in his hands, let him make plays, but he's a good enough route runner. He had good enough college production and spots. He got on the field as a freshman, which was good to see. I mean, there's an injury history in here too, but I like Deebo Samuel. He's one of those guys that we were doing the podcast, the Sonic Truth podcast the other day, and his name came up. He's definitely inside the top 10, no doubt. You've got him at 8. I think that's a fair spot. I think, especially when we're talking about just NFL draft context, this feels like a guy just purely because of how deep this class is. He might get pushed back a little bit, like you said, but he seems like a super duper value pick in round 4, probably. I don't know if he goes in round 3. I'm just thinking about all these guys at this point. I'm like, how do you squeeze him in? Because you've got a guy, again, that we're going to get to at number 10 that I think is going to end up higher than a guy like Deebo Samuel. But in terms of what he brings to an NFL franchise, he's going to be a super valuable addition to any team. Do
you have a running Deebo Samuel comparison? Because I don't think I've seen one that I really agree with. I think the one that I've seen the most of is kind of like an Anquan Bolden-ish You know, kind of, and I think his testing came a lot closer to that than I initially thought it was. So do you have a good working comparison for Debo?
Man, I don't know that I've really tried to put one together for Debo. It's kind of a tough analysis.
He's tough, yeah. And that's why I'm asking, because I haven't really seen one that anyone's like super confident in.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have him pegged for anything. He's been a tough one. Like inside the breakout finder in terms of production, there's a lot of guys that kind of are in that class. It looks like Ardarius Stewart's kind of close to him. I don't know if that's necessarily a good comp in terms of, on the field ability, but yeah, it's tough, man. I don't really have one, to be quite honest with you, but I like him as a player. I like the tape. I like his well-rounded, versatile skill set, and there's no doubt he gets into the league, especially after what he did at the Combine. So,
for sure.
All right, man, this is a guy that I think a lot of us are a fan of.
For sure.
In fantasy and dynasty, my personal opinion, I think he goes higher than this. But again, this is not a fantasy conversation per se. So tell me about your next guy. Who do you have at number 9?
Andy Isabella,
right.
Wide receiver 9. I think, I get, it's been these last couple wide receivers for me. I kind of, I don't want to say I've locked these top 10 grades in yet, because especially this bottom half, and again, wide receiver 10, we'll definitely have a conversation about as well. But wide receiver 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, I think those spots, if you tell me that you're going to have a guy a slot or two higher, I'm not really going to argue with. Again, it speaks to just how deep and how talented this class is. Andy Isabella, my favorite Andy Isabella, stat that I've seen is, I saw someone, it might have been Mike Renner over at PFF, someone tweeted out, Georgia's secondary, and just how they ended up just clamping down opponents all year long, allowing 60 yards through the air, 50 yards through the air, and he went through the whole schedule, and it might have been week 11, 12, 13, whenever UMass played Georgia, and Andy Isabella exploded for like 200 something yards against, again, this vaunted SEC secondary with obviously some Sunday players in it. So I think the first thing you get with Andy Isabella, you see him, obviously he's small, so he's going to get obviously the generic Wes Welker, Amendola, whatever white slot shifty receiver you want to throw out there. He's gonna get those comparisons. So that's the first thing you see. Second thing you see is all the production. Again, we just talked about the whole Georgia game and how he popped there, but the dude just compiled numbers. So he's checking two boxes right there. As far as to talk about build, we have to talk about build as you talk about his track speed. The dude is an absolute blazer. I think there was some rumors that he ran a 4.2 something at some point, whether leaving high school or early college or something like that. We didn't get that at the Combine. There was a little stopwatch drama at the Combine. I think they flagged him high, and then they ended up correcting that or whatever. But so the dude's obviously athletic, obviously a burner, has the production. So there's a lot to like about Andy. Obviously people come back to the size and at the Senior Bowl, the story was obviously he's super quick off the line, but he does maybe tend to take a little bit longer to kind of, work out of his break and kind of create that separation. His feet are a little bit too, choppy. So again, it's just something to go back if you're going to go end up rewatching him and kind of reevaluating. But with Andy Isabella, man, if you told me he was a top 5 wide receiver, I'm not necessarily gonna argue with you. And I think, to your point, he goes a lot higher in Dynasty, and he probably goes a lot higher than where I have him currently ranked in the actual NFL draft. I think there's a lot to like about someone like this. And again, we talked about how teams are kind of coveting these smaller type wide receiver, the shiftier, the quicker type wide receivers, and Andy Isabella kind of fits that build to a T.
Yeah, I mean, and I hate the terms gritty. I hate all those phrases when you talk
Coach's
about
son,
like this.
First in, last out, and all that shit.
Yeah, exactly. It's I hate that, but I mean, he is a guy that was a volume receiver, and hopefully at the next level, any team that drafts him, the expectation is that they're going to be able to just funnel targets to him. Make those tough plays, get those tough yards. But when you run a 4.31, I mean, so 100th percentile, 4.31, the speed is undeniable. So he's going to force defenses to really play him, play him with a cushion, because you're going to get burned. If he gets you on a move, there's no way you're making that up. And coverage is going to have to rotate to stay over the top of him, because at the next level, inevitably, this type of speed, people are going to take shots. And defenses are going to be fearful of, okay, he's been beating us inside, he's been beating us shallow. When are they going deep? When are they going to test him? And there's very few guys that have the volume to put with speed like this. I know a couple years ago we saw Zay Jones, right? Zay Jones, very good athlete, ton of college production, not a 4.31 though. And this is what we talk about when we talk about sort of guys used to be more this size when we would talk about a guy with this sort of speed. It's crazy to think that DK Metcalf has 50 pounds on this guy and ran 2/100ths of a second slower.
It doesn't make sense.
Right, like it doesn't. I mean, it really doesn't. But to Andy Isabella's credit, a 4.31 is still sort of an all-time great time.
Yeah, he's flying.
Yeah, so yeah, for sure. So I kind of feel like the right team, and I keep saying the third round, but I feel like the third round feels like a sweet spot for a guy like this, maybe late third, early fourth. Coming out of UMass, you know, so not the toughest level of competition. And guys will cite his college dominator, 97th percentile. But I always bring this up, you know, having a great college dominator playing at UMass versus having a great college dominator playing at an SEC school, those dominators can't be the same thing, right? Like a 97th percentile in both different versions is not the same 97th percentile. But with that being said, the guy's got the athleticism to pair with the production. And if he gets the draft capital in terms of dynasty, I think everybody's going to want to own him. But even still, this is the type of guy that you're going to want to own anyways, because it's undeniable that he will eventually ascend a depth chart and find a role on a team and likely become the player that I think a lot of people think he can be, which is maybe an 80, 90 catch guy in the league, sort of a short area with the ability to burn you deep. You know, and in college, yards per reception, 16.6, so 76th percentile. So he's not on that Zay Jones 10.3 yards per reception. I mean, we're talking about two different players. A lot of guys want to use the term compiler negatively. You used it, but you didn't mean it as a negative. You were just talking about, you know, the volume, the usage. So I think at the next level, I don't really see that falling off. It's just a matter of, can a guy that's 5'9", 188 hold up to the standards of NFL?
I think it definitely comes back to his size and to his ability and how much you want to trust that going forward. I was really high on someone like Ryan Switzer coming out, so I feel like I built myself up for Ryan Switzer, and he's flashed here and there, and you know, he's still hanging on. And I think there's a guy. There might be a guy like Andy Isabella, probably not as fast, but kind of in that same mold. We get that same guy or two every single year, and you know, it's not fair to them to compare them to, you know, the Wes Welkers and stuff like that. It's just, those are easy comparisons, but that's setting the bar super, super high. Again, not to say that they can't reach those bars, but again, we just kind of have these built-in comparisons just given their build. And I guess that's kind of the point of them, you know, stylistically or whatever the case may be. Do you have a favorite landing spot for Andy Isabella? I've heard a couple of them that I personally really like, but I'd be curious your kind of take on it.
To be honest with you, a couple of them that have popped into my head recently, I wouldn't mind him going to Green Bay. I think that's a spot where they could utilize that speed.
Randall Cobb's exiting, all that. Yep.
Yeah. And you know, Aaron Rodgers is cerebral enough to make those quick plays when he needs to, and I think he could really use a guy like this. Devontae is a great receiver. I mean, I don't think when he came out necessarily a lot of people were a big fan of him. He had a lot of college production too, but he's obviously one of the best in the league. If you paired him with a guy like this that was a speed guy, we know all those plays where there's a penalty and Rodgers is taking that free play down the field. Who better to throw it to than Andy Isabella, because he's going to burn that coverage. But I think Green Bay would be a good fit. Obviously, New England has always utilized these guys. That's where you want to see them go. Prior to Alex Smith going down, we saw some good years with a guy like Jamison Crowder, who kind of played that slot role, that quick hitter role. Seemed like the ideology over there, the scheme was really good. That's kind of ones that sort of pop into my head. What do you think?
I mean, the two that I heard, which I don't know, might be obvious or might be kind of cheating or kind of lame options, but you get him in New Orleans with Drew Brees, the dude that obviously is gonna stretch the field. And the other one that I heard, which might make a little more sense now given Antonio Brown's exit, is you pair him with Big Ben in Pittsburgh. Obviously, I know they got James Washington there. They obviously have Juju. A lot of people are really high on Washington. So maybe it's not the most favorable destination if you got some James Washington shares that you're kind of holding on to and protecting. But Pittsburgh's done really well, drafting, kind of developing, and kind of inserting these wide receivers into their game plan. So Pittsburgh kind of stands out on top of the list for me.
I think we've seen both of those teams work with multiple receivers too, not just two, but get a third guy involved. I mean, that's two organizations that, I mean, we remember the Saints when they had, was Meacham and Colston and
Devery Henderson.
Yeah, Devery Henderson. I mean,
right?
They had a ton of dudes. They've always been able to function like that. Then with Kamara out of the backfield, it just really changes things. But yeah, I would love to see him go to any of those spots. I think that he's a great option anywhere. I would love to see him go to a team that's going to target him more frequently than maybe those teams would.
Sure.
But nonetheless, I think he could be a fit stylistically for a lot of spots. All right, man, let's do it. So hit me with your number 10 receiver who almost certainly is not number 10 on most lists.
No, and I put him there just because you are my boy. No, I'm just kidding. Dude, Kelvin Harmon, man, is, I imagine, he really shouldn't have been polarizing before. I don't think he was, but now I think, again, after the combine, it goes back to, we talked about earlier, people that are going to, recheck some things and perhaps even overreact to some things. So Kelvin Harmon was a player that did not, unfortunately, do himself any sort of favors at the combine. So a lot of people kind of see the testing numbers and maybe go back to the tape where I think a lot of people kind of had, at least for me, it was almost like watching A.J. Brown in the sense that I thought he was a good player. He didn't have a ton of, he had kind of his flash plays where he would, kind of go up and obviously, out body a defensive back, but he just felt like just a very good player that, it wasn't, I wasn't watching, a ton of crazy explosive plays. He kind of just went about his business. I kind of compared him to like an Allen Robinson type of player. Again, Allen Robinson had fantastic, tape at Penn State, but he wasn't a player that many were super excited about, at least from what I can remember. But with Kelvin Harmon, man, you get obviously the build, 6'3", 200 something, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. So again, I mean, he's checking a lot of these boxes, kind of, build wise, production wise, and then there's just kind of the lingering questions about, well, what do you want to make about his, athletic scores? Is that something you really want to, have kind of write this story for you? And I'll kick it over to you, man, because you've been, much like the Paris Campbells, you've been a Kelvin Harmon truther, and for very good reason. So I know you might have exited the combine feeling a little bit down in the dumps, but why don't you go ahead and let people really know, kind of where you sit right now and how that's maybe changed things for you.
So, yeah, this is a good opportunity for me to say I just talked to Kelvin Harmon here today, and he's coming on the Sonic Truth podcast in April, so it'll be fun to get to chat with him. Yeah, man. So, dude, I saw some plays. He used to DM me, and he'd show me some really cool sort of like behind-the-scenes practice stuff. So I remember seeing him make these circus catches, and it always brings me back to how sure-handed I think he is. Yeah, he's one of the most. Yeah, for sure. I think he's one of the most natural, sort of solid, reach out, pluck it out of the air receivers in this class, and he pairs that with great size. Yeah, the combine was a little bit of a letdown. There's no doubt. I think I tried to project that he was going to run 4.55. I joked in the beginning of it that I'm going to miss by a full half second, and long and behold, I missed by a full half second. He runs a 4.6. So, it shows on like player profile. He comps to Mike Williams, which I can kind of see that now. But I still think that at this point, I think Kelvin Harmon may have fallen out of the round one conversation potentially. I think he's a day two guy, early day two guy at this point. I don't know where other people have him. I think it's an overreaction, again, to look at the athleticism here and totally knock him down the board. Again, we talked about Riley Ridley earlier. I think people thought Ridley was more athletic than he actually is, where I think I kind of thought Kelvin Harmon was already sort of in this range. it wasn't a great combine by any means. But again, I don't think that he was any different than what I expected when I already thought that he was sort of a fringe first, second round player. But again, he had production as a freshman. I remember that's kind of when I first came across him. I was looking at Matthew Days, and I was like, who the hell is this guy? You know, I started catching some glimpses of him, 460 yards receiving as a freshman. And then incrementally, this is what you always want to see. You want progress, right? You want to see guys kind of grow into their role, and that's what we saw him do into the sophomore season and into the junior season and sort of gain this steam. So I'm a fan of him. I think he's a natural receiver. No, he's obviously not a burner. I like the Allen Robinson comp. I like the sort of the Mike Williams comp. I think he's going to be physical with corners, and he's going to force them to play him tight. And he's a back shoulder guy. Kind of put it up, let him jump ball for it. But, of course, again, it's really tough because this is the class where we just saw freak athletes show up unexpectedly. And guys like Kelvin Harmon kind of got put on notice because it's like you can get a guy that's even bigger than Kelvin Harmon, that's twice the athlete of Kelvin Harmon, may not have the production, may not be quite as refined, and it's like, do I want to save myself the second round pick and maybe go for a guy in round 3 that may not have the skill set of Harmon today, but has the better physical attributes and we can coach him up? It's going to be one of those things for teams. But personally, man, I love Kelvin Harmon. I like him I'd like him on the Seattle roster. I'd be a fan of it. Russ could throw him open. But yeah, man, I think at number 10, I'm not surprised. I don't think it's an overreaction. I think he was probably higher on some boards for people, but I don't think Harmon fell as much as other people rose.
I think that's a perfect way to put it, because he was someone that was coming in that 5-6 range for me. And then you got guys that just, again, absolutely set the combine on fire, like the Miles Boykins and stuff like that, or the Emmanuel Halls, who kind of rechecked that box and really kind of verify some things. And again, a lot of these players, again, going back to someone like Emmanuel Hall, there are question marks. I say that they're safe in the sense that I think their game, translates. They do things that coaches. It's easy to kind of coach that stuff out of them. Easy for them to do that same stuff on Sundays, as opposed to he's got some kind of concerns with his hands or something like that. So with Kelvin Harmon, to your point, I think there's probably a fair kind of balance in between where you obviously you see what he's done on tape, the hands, all that stuff. He just feels like a truly safe wide receiver in that regard. And then you kind of have to work back and say, well, how much, does he look quicker on tape? Do I think he's was it nerves at the combine? Was it something else? It shouldn't necessarily be the end all be all, sure. As we've kind of, touched on throughout this podcast. So sure. Do you think, is there a name inside my top 10 that we talked about? Is there an egregious name missing? I think would be my first question for you as we go to wrap up here. My second question for you would be, who would be another name that we haven't touched on that would be kind of the fringe top 10 type player?
Man, I don't think anything in here is egregious, because again, when I look at this as like NFL context, draft context, I don't dislike any of this. I think it's fair. I think you've got guys that I might consider a project in a little bit of a sense, but where they're a bit of a project, they're an elite athlete.
Sure.
And you can't have a guy that's a project and an average athlete. You know what I mean? So
right.
I'm fine. I'm fine with the Miles Boykin spot. I'm fine with the Emmanuel Hall spot. I like it. I don't dislike this at all. Just because you got Paris Campbell in the top 5, I'm all good. But I think that one of the guys that's not getting a lot of run because he didn't test at the combine would be J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. I think that this is a guy that, and we'll wrap up here, but we can touch on him just a touch. I think he's a guy that when he does his pro day, I think that he's going to rise up a lot. He only stands to go up because he's got the athleticism. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of rumors that he was going to be a sneaky speed guy, that he was going to be a little faster than what people expected. That if you thought he was going to be a 4.65, 4.6 guy, I think he's gonna surprise you. And if he does, that's the type of guy that I can see kind of creeping in here, because he's a dominant red zone player with that basketball background, boxing guys out jumping guys. I remember there was a hilarious tweet. I don't remember who did it. Remember during the combine, somebody tweeted out that he had a 40-inch vertical, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And I think that was Boykin. No, it was 40.
Oh, that's
and a half,
right. They somehow they got their whole testing all mixed around or something like that. I did see that.
Oh man, yeah, brutal. And I was like, "Holy crap, man!" Because I was looking back at his spring testing, and he was at like a 28.5-inch vertical or something, or a 30-inch vertical, and I was like, how the hell did he jump 13.5 inches greater than he did like 9 months ago? And I'm like going back through all my ways that I check, and I'm like, I don't get it. So when he was like, no, it's not that guy, it was, Boykin, I'm like, all right, that makes sense. But this is a guy who had a little bit of production prior to his senior season, but really came out his senior year. I'm not typically a touchdown is a difference maker for me in terms of how I evaluate, like the David Sills thing.
Sure.
Corey Coleman was a great athlete, but he's another example of a lot of touchdowns.
Don't you can't bring up Corey, man.
I don't want to do this right now.
I know. It's not the time. It's not the time.
I don't want to do it, but I will say this: when you're talking about a guy that's got the size of Arcega-Whiteside and the style of Arcega-Whiteside, when you start to look at the touchdowns, sort of as like to paint a picture with him, I like it there because you want that guy for a red zone threat. You want that guy for a jump ball option where it doesn't mean as much with other guys. For him, it means something to me. And like watching him go up against a lot of the teams in the Pac-12 this year, there was some tough competition that he faced, and he had multiple 100-yard games, 5 of them over 100 yards. He had a game where he went 226 with 3 touchdowns. He had a game against UCLA with 3 touchdowns, multiple 2-touchdown games, 3 of those. So it's like, this is the guy. Yeah, exactly.
The box scores were definitely there. The box scores were definitely there. Yeah, you could definitely play.
That's where he stands out to me, and that's the thing that I could see change is when he tests at his pro day. That's a guy that I could see rise up on a lot of draft boards and jump into that. A team could covet him in the 3rd round. There's so many receivers. I keep saying the 3rd round. I don't know what to do with them all.
This class is special, man. I mean, I think it was a group that a lot of us, again from that kind of dynasty Devy kind of lens, a lot of us kind of had circled this class, a couple years back, like, you never want to wait for anything, but it was always kind of just wait for 2019 and the wide receivers are going to be back, and I was a little surprised early on, before kind of the whole, even the college seasons were ending and we got into the whole All-Star circuits and stuff like that, the tweets I was seeing about kind of the league being down in this class, it never really made too much sense with me. So I was obviously very stoked to see, as you said, just the amount of standout athletes that we saw in this class, and again just a really at the top, you got some guys that are obviously going to project as kind of in that wide receiver 1 mold, but then throughout the class, man, to your point, just so much depth, and there's really kind of a flavor for everyone here, depending on what your roster's looking for. So from a real life draft perspective, I think some teams are going to get better, and then obviously from again that dynasty standpoint as well, from a fantasy football standpoint, there are a handful of players here that can really kind of come in and contribute early. So
for sure, man. And there's a lot of guys we couldn't get to. I mean, we're going on 42 minutes right now, so this is twice as long as we thought we were going to go.
We gotta figure this out. We gotta figure this out.
Yeah, we're working on it. So yeah, man, this is good. We went in deep on some prospects. I love your list. I'm glad you got it out there, and people can check this out and hear some of the deep dive on it. Check Ryan out on Twitter. You can see it right there. Still Ryan5.
Am I on? Am I close to it?
Yeah. You're right there. It's to the left a little bit. Yeah, you're close. Yeah, your hand was.
Okay, we're good.
Yeah, he's a Raiders guy. Always tweeting about the Raiders. Real smart stuff. A good follow, man. So check him out. And you'll see a lot of his work coming up on BreakoutFinder.com when that thing launches. And there's more news to come with that, man. So right on, dude. I'm appreciate you coming on here.
Appreciate you, man. It's been a blast. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do this again for sure, man.